Hi, and welcome to the Pinball Podcast focused on the innovators and makers who are crafting homebrew, custom, and rethemed pinball machines, the technology that makes these personal projects possible, and the companies helping with these journeys. Custom pinballs are a deeply personal and technically challenging undertaking, requiring time, money, knowledge, and most importantly, the desire to make it happen. I'm Dan Rosenstein, your host. Join me, and let's go under the playfield and see what's needed to make a custom pinball possible. In this episode, we cover our first pinball maker and innovator and his awesome custom design. We take a break and go do a retrospective of the custom pinballs at Pinball Expo with a special guest, and finish up the custom pinball interview with more detailed time under the playfield on this amazing theme in part 2. So today on the show, I've got a pinball innovator and maker, Kyle, who's going to introduce himself. And I don't want to steal his thunder, so Kyle's going to tell you a little bit about himself and the basics of the theme that he's got going on.
Sure. Hi, my name is Kyle Reed. I kind of got into pinball, I would say maybe 5 or 6 years ago. My brother actually bought a Flight 2000 that was on Craigslist as a parts machine for like $250, and he paid someone to come fix it up. And I thought that was just like the coolest thing ever. You have a pinball machine in your house? What?
And Flight 2000 is an awesome game too.
It is. And I actually have that in my house now. I bought it from him, and that's the next one I'm going to do a restoration on. But I started off with a F14 actually.
F14 was my first machine. I had no idea.
Yep. So I bought that when I was in Cincinnati for around 2 years for work, and then moved back to Michigan. But that F14, once I got back to Michigan, I did a full restoration. Like, I stripped it down to just the bare wood. I stenciled on new artwork. I did a playfield swap, all new targets, all new switches, new boards, everything. So it plays like brand new.
That's amazing. That machine, I got mine. It was my first machine I got when I was 13, but this isn't my origin story. And I still have it in my collection. And that machine kicks my ass every single time I play it. I cannot get above 2 million points, no matter how much I try. So, Kyle, before we really get into the meat of this, I wanted to tell you, when I reached out to you, we connected through Facebook. We went back and forth on IM. I'd already seen some of the stuff you've been doing with your homebrew custom theme. And you sent me hundreds of pictures and videos and CAD drawings. And right now, while we're doing this interview, I've got a reel on the TV going of one of the recordings you have. You have hours and hours, and I think days of hours of information. So when we finish this up, we'll share some of that. But I want to tell you that the amount of the depth and the completeness you've done for the project you're working on is unbelievable. So you talked a little bit about your origin story. You said you've been doing this for 5 years at the Flight 2000. So what type of games do you actually like before we start talking about the theme and what you're building?
For me, so my first new unbox was actually a Willy Wonka. Wonka was a huge part of my childhood. Watched that movie on repeat, and that kind of got me started in the new unbox realm. And Jersey Jack, for me, just like the ability to incorporate like a world under glass and create experiences is really something that I admire. I mean, I'm not a competitive player by any means. Like, I don't learn the depth of rule sets. What I really enjoy is the storytelling that a pinball machine can do through that gameplay experience. And so that's kind of what I want to try to do with mine. While, incorporating some of the common elements that you see across machines today.
Gotcha. So how did you get into homebrew? How did you had mentioned just a couple minutes ago that there might have been some retheming in your history. So tell me about that.
I'm a man of many talents and a master of zero. I have picked up like the dumbest of hobbies, and just for the sake of learning it and saying that I did it type of thing. But I've always proven to myself that I can accomplish what I set myself out to do. So with homebrew, like, I had seen it done. Like, I kind of caught wind of it, I would say like 3 or 4 years ago, with Metroid and Sonic, and obviously TNA that Scott rolled out. I mean, those were kind of the first glimpses into homebrew for me. And I'm like, I never thought that would be something you could actually do, is build your own pinball machine, but well, I'm gonna do it.
Total great inspiration pieces also, some of the best home brews that have been made.
Exactly. And so, it was always like something in the back of my mind that I wanted to do, but I never like had the actual like courage to do it until I'd say maybe a year ago. And that's when I really kind of started diving into it and trying to understand what all encompassed building, your own machine. And I started similar to like what the Sonic Spinball did with Ryan, is he started in visual pinball and then ported that over to CAD so you could actually produce it, and then try testing that out with the shots to make sure that it translates. And I'm getting very close to that point.
So will so on that, the you started with the Flight 2000 and then F-14 Tomcat and did restorations and fix up for those. So I take it that you're mechanically inclined, electrically inclined, like you like to tinker, you were able to fix those machines and get them up and running. And so did you feel that homebrew was kind of a logical, or perhaps not a logical, but a cliff diving step off of where you were?
I mean, definitely cliff diving. I've always been, someone who can figure that kind of stuff out. The first house I bought was in foreclosure, and it had the floor was sunken into the crawl space, and I did a full, flip on that house. And all the pins that I've had, I've done whatever I can to improve them. I had a Star Trek Next Generation that was in really rough shape, and I did a whole number on that as well. And it's just something that I've always liked tinkering. I've liked working on projects just for, I don't know, it's just fun for me. I like having that kind of mindset of getting into the technical details of how and why things work.
So this is your first custom design. We haven't actually said what the theme is, so why don't you take the time now to say it's a killer theme. It's like many people's dream themes. I know Amanda Hamilton, it's from the Free Play Pinball podcast, is a huge fan, and Kyle, the theme is
Harry Potter.
Harry
Um,
Potter.
Huge Harry Potter fan myself. Um, so, I mean, of course, I've seen the movies, read the books, listened to the audiobooks. I've done all of it, and I've always wanted to see what that could become in a pinball machine. So, I mean, why not?
So why not? Now, you said you were a tinkerer. You're a man of many talents, and you like to try new things. Pinball requires mechanical, electrical, programming, design, manufacturing, construction. I saw videos of you doing CNC routing. Looks like you have access or may have a CNC route. So, before we talk about the details of Harry Potter and what's going into it, which is such an amazing theme, like I'd love to know, and I'm sure that the audience would love to know, like, what skills did you start with? Are you starting at ground zero? Do you feel you came in with some of these? What have you learned also?
I feel like I came in with some of these. I mean, I grew up on a farm. My dad was a master electrician for, 30 years plus, worked on engines and all that kind of stuff. So I learned a lot of the technical, mechanical side of things from him. It's in my blood. But I also, through school, I pursued an engineering degree. And then nowadays, I'm doing more analytical work. I taught myself how to code in Visual Basic and automate some of the scripting and things like that. Um, so like, I've had a little bit here and there, but it's definitely not anything that like I excel in or I was trained in. It's just things that I've picked up along the way. And that's, I always, like I said, I pick up so many stupid, pointless hobbies, but they all kind of come together for this project, which is awesome.
That's actually one of the reasons why I love pinball. And I actually like all kinds of control systems. It's because it does bring the mechanical, the electrical, the programming, the woodworking, the craftsmanship, the artwork all together. And it's not at all a surprise that you having that growing up on a farm and having that farm ingenuity and then having that engineering background is helping here. Look, I'm an engineer, you're an engineer. Do you feel that you have to be an engineer to take on a homebrew project? Or
Absolutely not. I mean, there's so many fantastic resources out there, so many communities where you can go get your feet wet and try to understand what it entails. But if you're anyone with common sense, you can go out there and read through some tutorials online or watch some YouTube videos. I mean, everyone gets their start somewhere, and you can pick it up along the way. It's just learning how to.
Spot on. Having the desire to do it and the desire to finish it, which is always my problem. I'm happy to start projects. It's hard finishing them for me. So now we've gone through some intro things. That was a good build up. So let's talk Harry Potter. I was watching the videos, I was listening to what you were saying, and you mentioned that you read the books and watched the movies multiple times. If you had to guess, how many times have you read the series and watched the movies, and which is your favorite book?
Well, over the course of the last year, I'd say I've probably watched the movies and listened to the audiobooks. I mean, audiobooks at least once over, some of them twice. The movies I've seen probably 5, 10 times
Oh, wow.
each over the last year. And before that, it was something that I would just like watch on repeat too. So, unpopular opinion though, I would say my favorite is probably Goblet of Fire.
Totally. And there's some inspiration about that on the machine, which we'll talk about. So with that said, like, when you went down the journey about a year ago that you were gonna do a homebrew, was it Harry Potter from the beginning, or were there other ideas of formulating? I'm sure you have a laundry list of other machines you want to build. So
Actually, so like for me, Harry Potter was actually kind of always at the front. It was something that I wanted to see done. I've always wanted someone to make it. And from what I had read is that there's not really a big desire from J.K. Rowling for it to actually become a pinball machine. So for me, I'm like, well, if no one's going to do it, or maybe someone is doing it for all I know, but I want to do it. So I went for it.
yeah, I've heard the J.K. Rowling. I don't want to call it a rumor, but like the speculation about it as well. I'm not here to say whether it's I have no idea how
Yeah,
much truth there is, but I've
same.
definitely heard the same. But I think that's a good way to go. Like, you don't know if anybody else is going to do it, so you might as well try. I can totally appreciate that. You mentioned you had a Jersey Jack Willy Wonka, if I remember correctly. You got that new in box. Listen to your videos. It sounds like you might have a couple other Jersey Jacks as well. So before we get into all the details of the machine, which I'm super excited about, what pinballs do you feel really inspired what's going on in your Harry Potter?
So so here's another interesting story. I got in, like when I said I got into pinball was like 4 or 5 years ago. I went to a pinball show, Cincinnati, with a buddy of mine down in Cincinnati. And at that time, I had F-14 and Star Trek Next Gen. And I played at the show a JJP Pirates.
Oh,
And like, this was all new to me. I had no idea that, it would turn out to be as valuable as it is today. But at the time, I played it on the show floor there. And I'm like, this thing is just so much fun. It's something of the hundreds of machines there. I just kept going back to it because I was having so much fun playing it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to save up money and buy this machine. And lo and behold, a few months later, they pulled it from production and that never happened.
oh no.
So, I love what they did with that game. I took a lot of inspiration from some other really popular games out there. I like some of what's been done with like Godzilla and creating unique shots like the tail whip shot. I like creating, unique and different shots instead of something other than just the standard fan layout. So I pull a lot of inspiration from, really just kind of what games out there are popular, what the good designers are doing, and trying to see how I can do something unique and different that's also, following that same kind of framework.
So let's actually start diving into that design process. As I like to say, let's get under the playfield. Let's talk about what's going on there. One of the things that I really was amazed, and you had keyed in on it a little bit ago, is that you chose a design process where you started digital first. Now, there's no right. I don't believe there's a right way or a wrong way to do it. I can very much understand the value of a digital first. You started with virtual pinball, you then moved it into Fusion 360 for CAD. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your process there and why you decided to start with digital first, any advantages or disadvantages. And also like going from virtual pinball to Fusion 360, like, was it straightforward? Could it have been better? Like, I'd love to hear that, and I'm sure the listeners would want to hear that too.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, being that this was like my first homebrew attempt, and I didn't have the investment and the resources to actually make it happen at the time, I started digitally for that reason. Like I wanted to just kind of test the waters and see, is this something that I could do and something that I really want to pursue? So I started out with visual pinball and I used that to experiment with thousands of different layouts. And really, I spent probably a good year just building a layout that I thought was something that was actually fun, it flowed well, and then making sure that in that digital representation, there's enough tolerances to allow for those shots to maybe translate a little bit better into the physical realm. So I started with that. And then from there, it's pretty simple in visual pinball. You can actually export like a JPEG or a PNG image that's like a top-down view of your play field and it's scaled correctly. And then when you go into Fusion 360, you can import that as a canvas and use that as like your template for where you should position certain holes and certain, mechs and features. So that part was, relatively clean, but the hard part for me is like I'm really good at CAD. Like I'll say that I've had lots of CAD experience in my lifetime, and picking up
it's evident from your videos.
Picking up Fusion 360 though, that's a little bit different. Like I'm used to AutoCAD,
Yep.
and when you start bringing in timelines into things and having to actually have an organized file, I mean, I suck at that. If you watch my videos, that's the next thing that I can do better. But um, I picked it up relatively quickly because I had that background. And the tougher part for me was, there's a lot of great CAD resources out there where you can pull some of those existing mechs and pull them into your program. But the real question is A, are they accurate and do the holes line up where they should?
Right.
And B, what if that file doesn't exist already? So I had to make a lot of stuff that didn't already exist as well.
And that's for the stuff that is kind of boilerplate. You also had to go do a bunch of design on custom mechs to make the unique game, the toys as we like to call them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to key in on a couple things that you talked about, because this is where like the real under the playfield part comes from. So virtual pinball, had you had exposure to visual pinball or virtual pinball? Did you play a lot of digital pinball before, or was this your first time going using virtual pinball?
First time ever, no
Okay.
experience whatsoever.
And so in doing that, did you also start playing other games on virtual pinball?
I did not. So I just downloaded the very basic VPX and used that to design and build. I didn't download any of the table packs that are out there.
Got it. So
pretty easy to pick up though.
Yeah, I've got I have a full scale virtual pinball machine as one of the machines in my collection, which is nice. It means I don't have to have 3,000 machines. I have got a good number of them in there. They're not as they're faithful recreations. And if I can't have all of them, I'll have the ones that I have in my collection and the rest of them digitally. So it definitely makes a very good approximation and very fun to play, especially with feedback, etc. We in the transition, I was actually surprised by this when you said it. In the transition, when you went from a virtual pinball to Fusion, you exported out the playfield and then rebuilt as a PNG, as a flat image, and then basically rebuilt the geometry from that playfield. What was the reason that you couldn't, and this might be a naive question, but I'm sure our listeners are wondering it. Why couldn't you just take the geometry that was in virtual pinball and bring that into Fusion 360?
So I'm not necessarily sure that like the actual CAD models of those files in visual pinball are something that you can actually import into CAD.
Oh, interesting.
Because in visual, I'm sure they're probably mesh files that they use for that. I'm not 100% familiar, but when you plop a mech in there, it's just like, all right, standard, here's how it works. It's got some pre-programmed code to make sure that a pop bumper works like a pop bumper. But like actually taking that and exporting it into like an actual CAD, I'm not entirely sure how well that would work, or at least I'm not smart enough to do that.
No, I've no doubt if you didn't figure out, it probably is either not possible or extremely difficult. That said, do you feel that the ability, do you feel that it was worthwhile to leave virtual pinball and then go into Fusion 360 and rebuild the CAD at that point? Or if that bridge would have been there, do you think that would have been useful for you?
I feel like the bridge could have been useful, but in my instance, like the geometry was really for visual pinball, I was really just using it just for the physics, trying to make sure that it played and flowed correctly. Now, like I wasn't doing anything crazy in visual pinball like I did in my actual fusion model with all the custom mechs and everything. I had ideas in my head. I'm like, okay, so I have this shot here. What if I have this custom mech here? Okay, that could kind of work. Like I had it like a rough idea in my head, but I didn't even dare try to, attempt to figure that out in visual pinball. I would rather actually do that in a program where I can create a physical model and actually create like a flat pattern for sheet metal and things like that and see it become a reality, as opposed to trying to like render, a custom file into visual pinball. I just used like the basic functionality of visual pinball.
So it really, I mean, you had said it earlier, but it really was for shot, for layout, for flow, for geometry. Okay, that completely makes sense. And so would you recommend that to, somebody else who's starting their journey, who's now bought their Flight 2000, who's bought their F14, restored them, and they're going on this journey, they're a year behind you? Would you say that right now that's the way to go? Start with your shot layout, your geometry, your flow in virtual pinball, and then export that to as a play field, and then start building it up in Fusion 360?
So I'm not going to 100% commit to saying yes, that's the way to go, just because I haven't seen that translate physically yet. But that
sure. I wasn't trying to
yeah. But that was recommended to me by Ryan McQuaid with what he did with Sonic. So I just kind of heard through the grapevine that's what he did, and by word of mouth, and I'm like, well, I'll give that a try. And I asked him in a few of his streams as well. But I mean, people go at it so many different ways. People buy a piece of plywood and start drilling holes in it. And for me, what visual pinball allowed me to do was test, 1,000 different layouts before, buying a piece of plywood.
And that's what's so cool about this homebrew community, is that you're absolutely right. There's people that just start with plywood, start drilling holes and seeing what works. There are those that sketch it out on paper and then start working in wood. Like there are those that go directly into CAD first, and there's no right or wrong way for this process. So I really love that answer. That was awesome. So, you've got some extremely clever mechanical engineering, some very, very clever kinetic flow and sculpted design. Your Whomping Willow is one of the like most beautiful like 3D sculpts I've seen. And you also talked in your videos around multifunction in the mechs. Like that was a consistent theme that kept coming back. So let's translate. And then also one other one. There was this theme integration of the ball disappearing and reappearing in different parts of the field. Going with that Harry Potter theme. So I wanted to talk about how, as we go from design into gameplay philosophy, how you sculpted the design of the game between the mechanical features, the flow of the game, the multifunctioning mechs, and where the ball is and what it's doing. Kind of an open-ended question, but that's the kickoff.
Yeah. So I mean, really kind of like the overarching theme for me here is I wanted to create experiences and I wanted to create magical moments. And so really that was what drove me to say, okay, so how do I go about making that happen in a physical world? So that that entails making the ball disappear and reappear at different areas of the play field. And I went through several iterations of like how the flu network was going to work. So when you shoot one flu fireplace, it instantly pops out the other, type of thing. And I settled on design with that. But also aside from the whole it disappears and reappears, what I wanted to incorporate was every single shot possible on the playfield. I want to have multiple outcomes.
Oh, cool.
So it's not always predictable, but it will have some predictability based on mode. And how I indicate that to the player will most likely be using an insert to say, okay, the playfield is in this mode state, so you should kind of get used to where the shots go when it's in that mode state. No different than like, on Deadpool when that orbit drop ramp goes down. It's like it's predictably there when you know it's going to be there type of
Right.
thing.
Makes sense. Have you worked through your inserts and your layout for them, or is that still a work in progress?
So inserts I haven't even touched yet.
Okay.
Before I really start laying out inserts, the goal is to come up with a really good architecture for the code and rules, because that's really going to help determine, what inserts I need where.
Yeah.
But the basic idea is every shot will be tied to a location, and every shot will be tied to a character. Um,
And to that, one of the things that I was really impressed about is your design at the lower part of the playfield. Like the fact that you've got all of the outlanes and inlanes, and then each of them has some type of interesting, let's call it feature. Like there's the nudging back into the shooter from the drain. There's Dobby's dual magnet save. There's the Vuck to the left flipper via the diverter. All of these, and I realize that the listeners don't have the images in front of them, but talk a little bit about your game philosophy in that lower third of the playfield, which was a lot of very unique pieces.
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, and like I said, I'm trying to be creative and think of things that haven't been done before. So, with this design, I wanted it to be a wide body, and I know wide bodies have like this kind of, everyone says it's a slow, floaty game, so, and that's because your wider shots take longer to go around orbits and there's more horizontal motion. So what I'm trying to do with my lower third is create a sense of speed and pace. So both of my widest in lanes on the playfield actually feed to the flippers. So one of the shots, it's like the right inner orbit, I call it, is actually like a figure eight shot that feeds right back down to that furthest right in lane. So it'll speed right to your flipper. So it's a really fast shot and it's really good for combos. Um, and so, with that, of course, your actual out lanes are, inset one further lane in. And so I think I remember watching a stream with Eric Manure back in 2020, back when he was doing some streams out of his house, and he talked about how he likes to be physical with the game, and he likes to give some advantages to people who are physical with the game while risking the danger of tilting.
Yep.
And so I kind of tried to incorporate that into both of my outlanes. So my right outlane has what I call the Dobby save feature. So it would bounce down and you would try to nudge it up into a target that's underneath that lane guide there. And if you activate that target and it's qualified, Dobby will actually whip your ball along the apron and back up the other out lane on the left side and back up into play. So, like, that's one feature there. But, like, on the left out lane, I also put a post where if you can nudge it correctly, there's a one-way gate that you can nudge it back up through to feed your left flipper. So,
and that's one of my absolute favorite items on real classic early 80s late 70s Ballys is that the ability to just slightly nudge it back in and go through that gate and save that ball and be able to shoot again. It really is a great addition on this layout. It's been a jam-packed interview, starting with Kyle, an intro about him, getting into the design process, going under the playfield for the Harry Potter pinball machine. We're going to take a break now. We're going to talk a little bit about Expo 2022 and the homebrews there, and then we're going to come back to part 2 of the Harry Potter interview with Kyle right afterwards. So back in October, I got to go to Pinball Expo in Chicago, and I had the best pinball traveling companion. My daughter Haley, who's 10 years old, is about to be 11 years old. And I've got her here on the show today so we can actually talk about the homebrews at Pinball Expo. So Haley, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good. So how's your day been so far?
It's been pretty good.
Pretty good. What have you been doing?
I don't know. Kind of just been chilling.
Chilling, getting packed.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we're going on a trip. Where are we going?
Disneyland.
That's right. We're going to Disneyland. But before we go to Disneyland, let's talk some homebrews from Pinball Expo. So
Yeah.
first of all, tell me, did you enjoy Pinball Expo?
Pinball Expo was really fun.
Now, we went for the first 2 days, Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, so we didn't go on Saturday because we knew that it would be really busy, and we were right. So,
And what did we do instead?
instead, we went to, like, downtown Chicago and, went to the top of Sears Tower. We went to the Color Factory and to American Girl.
Yeah, so it was a pretty awesome
that
time.
was a really fun day.
So, when we were there on Thursday and Friday, we spent a bunch of time at the custom pinballs.
Yes.
And before we talk about the custom pinballs, what was your favorite part of Expo?
My favorite part of Expo, so they had a taxi, and I'd never played taxi before, and I played it maybe for like an hour straight. Like, people would like go up to it, and I think that they would like try to play, and I just like kept restarting the game. And then they also had a Stranger Things LE, which I'd been wanting to play. So the topper was really cool on that one.
It was a pretty cool topper.
And I like Stranger Things, so
Yeah, you went back to that one a couple times.
yeah.
Any other highlights from the expo itself?
I don't think so. Just got to meet some people that you talk about.
Yeah, there were a lot of cool famous celebrities. What about the book that you had? How about that?
Oh, yeah. So, he made this like autograph signing book with a bunch of pictures of famous people for me to go sign, so I had like something to do because he thought I would be bored. I was not. I had a lot to do. So yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about custom pinballs. We just watched a video to jog your memory. So let's just actually go down custom pinball row and talk about the machines and what you remember about them. The first one is Dukes of Hazzard.
So Dukes of Hazzard, that one was really cool.
Yeah.
Clearly took a lot of time to make. I think I only played it like twice, but overall it was a really good machine.
If you had to say like one thing that you remember about playing Dukes of Hazzard, what would it be?
I just remember the guy that made it was really nice.
Oh, Jake,
and he
yeah.
had a cool dog.
Yeah. Jake is super cool. The next machine then is Pokemon. What'd you think of that one?
The Pokemon machine, was it down?
Yeah, I think it was down when we were there. Now, the video we just watched, it was working.
Yeah.
But this is actually a pretty common theme. Like, the homebrews on Thursday and Friday, were most of them up? Or did you get to play most of them?
So, the next one is League of Legends. That one, I tried playing for so long. I was like, geez, this game is laggy. And then I realized that it, like, totally was off.
But I'm sure it would have been a really cool one. That one and the
Yeah,
Pokemon
I spent
one.
like 10 minutes trying to get League of Legends to work. Because it was just frozen on this, like, one character.
Well, what about the next one, Haunted Cruise?
Haunted Cruise? I think I played that one. Mm-hmm. It was really cool. Yeah.
And then the Frozen was the next one.
So Frozen, it had like for Elsa, like right in the middle, it had this Disney Infinity character, and I saw it and just thought to myself that Frozen was like the coolest one there just because they had the Elsa Disney Infinity character.
Yeah, it ends up that even for homebrews, the licensing is tough, and you've got to buy the toys that you can get. All right, the next one was Sonic. So what do you remember about Sonic?
Sonic was very cool. Wait, was that the one where the people in front of us got to like the hardest level?
That was. And Ryan McQuaid, who's the creator of Sonic, was actually there, and he was going super crazy. Remember that they actually got to that level?
Yeah, because we were like waiting in the line for a bit, and we were like, "What is going on?" And they're like on level like 70.
So, do you remember anything about playing Sonic?
Think about playing Sonic. It had a really cool field? Like play field. Yeah.
So the next one was Pincraft. What did you think of that one?
Pincraft? I'm not that much of a fan of Minecraft. So I can't really yeah. But Pincraft was cool. It was like with the 3 lives, like with the 3 hearts. That was super cool.
That was super cool. Now the next couple machines, there's one that we can't make out what it was. The playfield was up the whole time.
Yeah.
And then Greyhounds, the race home, and Ghost in the Shell. When we were there and we went by a couple times, I don't think any of those were working.
Those ones weren't working. I don't think Deadpool was working either.
Was Deadpool not working as well?
Well, I don't remember playing it.
Yeah, I don't remember playing it either. So here's the thing, like
and same with Trashland.
Yeah, Trashland was down also, but it looked super cool. It had like all But the thing about the homebrews is like it's great to see them. It's great to see people bringing them out, and they're like really hard to make, and they're like individual projects. So I get that like they can be really hard to maintain, but we've got to figure out a way to get those machines playing at the show.
It was like less than half of them working. Yeah. And then Elf.
Yeah.
I was so excited to play Elf. It seemed like such a cool machine. Thursday it was off. Then we came there on Friday, and I was like, hey, maybe Elf's working today. The whole time we were there, it was off.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And then there was another Pokemon machine as well, right? But it wasn't in Homebrew Row.
It wasn't in the Homebrew Row, but it was somewhere else. I don't really remember the game, but I do remember that on the top, because they were very cute plushies. They had, I think they had a Charizard plushie, a Pikachu plushie, and a Snorlax plushie. So cool machine. So
Haley, with your experience at Pinball Expo, with our fun time there, your time with the custom and homebrew pinballs, is there anything, like, is there a theme that you want to see get made, or is there something for Pinball Expo next year that homebrewers should be aware of if they're bringing their machines?
Let me think for a second. An Umbrella Academy pinball machine would be the coolest thing ever.
That would be super cool.
Take that idea, someone. Make it.
And then what about advice for anybody who's bringing a homebrew to Pinball Expo next year?
Advice?
Yeah.
Make an Umbrella Academy. But so real advice. Make sure that your game is working.
Yeah, and if it's not, let's actually get the community to come together and help keep those machines working and keep people around them to talk about them, because they're so cool to look at, they're so cool to play, and it's a bummer when you walk up to a machine and it's unfortunately at that time just not working.
Yeah, but overall, Pinball Expo was awesome.
Well, Haley, I really appreciate you both going with me and doing this interview. Thanks.
Yes.
And now, part 2 of the interview with Kyle and his amazing Harry Potter pinball machine.
So let's switch into some of the mechanisms. And you've got some amazing ones. I mentioned the Whomping Willow. It's got an amazing sculpt detail. There's a double solenoid on it. What was the reason that you went with that double solenoid, and how did you get to the point that you needed the double solenoid design? What does it do?
Well, I went that route because I'm crazy and stupid, but so I wanted a multifunction mech. So the purpose of that Whomping Willow is it kind of guards your right in lanes that feed your flipper. Not too dissimilar, like if you were to place a pop bumper there and it could interfere with a shot, but instead I'll have a sculpted silicone Whomping Willow mech that sticks up out of the playfield there, and it's mounted to a spinning disc. And that spinning disc can either be powered through a drive wheel, or you can disengage the drive wheel and it can be free spinning. So there's the concept is that the Whomping Willow branches can actually be actuated with one of those two solenoids to where it can drop the branches down into the playfield and impede the ball path. So it'd be
so cool,
like a post that you would be hitting on a spinning disc type of thing. The other solenoid is there so that, because you have to, like, based on how that mech works, it's like a post, or not a post, like a shaft within a tube shaft. So one of those shafts drives the articulating arms on the tree, and the other one actually raises the entire disc mechanism up out of the playfield and creates a subway entrance. So if you're familiar in the books, they actually have to tickle like a root on, or a knot on the tree to get access to the passage to Shrieking Shack. So that would be similar to that.
You mentioned the subway path. In one of your videos that you sent me, I don't remember if this was one of the ones online. you showed how you were doing subway layout and planning. And I like to talk proverbially to go under the playfield, literally going under the playfield here. Your subway layout is amazing and complex. And spend a little time. Tell us how you went about designing the subway layout and the flow of that subway.
Sure. Well, I mean, so the whole concept of creating magical moments and having like the instantaneous transfer of the ball, you have to be able to stage balls to accomplish that. So I have, I think, 3 vucks that are placed across the playfield that are entrance points. And every time you shoot one of those vucks, I custom designed a mech that allows you to capture a ball in it while it manages the ball underneath it in the subway, because there's always going to be one staged underneath ready to go. So when you shoot one of the Flu Network shots, it's going to pop out the other one instantly. But that means there's always a ball there. So how do you manage those balls? So I take like a standard vertical up kicker from Pinball Life, and I modify it, and I put this kind of like claw mechanism in the back.
Uh-huh.
And what that'll allow me to do is when you shoot that scoop, the ball that you shot in there will rest on top of the claw, while the ball underneath can be ejected into the subway. And that allows you to kind of manage the staging of those balls. But with my subway system, you have to be able to position those without the player knowing as well. So if you're not shooting those scoops, they still got to be there ready to go at the start of the game. So the whole subway system is this gigantic kind of like cyclical, I forget what I call it exactly in those videos, but it's a self-staging subway.
That's so cool. It's like a whole track underneath. It's unbelievable. So no, that's pretty awesome about the subway layout and planning. And that I had no idea that balls were getting staged. I clearly missed that as I was watching the video. So that's even more cool. So not only do you have the subway and the entire subway system, but then all the staging there. That's so cool. I cannot imagine what the code's going to be like to manage all that state. But that's a problem for future, Kyle.
I try not to think about it.
So one of the most eye-catching things is actually something that's somewhat static, which are the 3D sculpts you have. You have a sculpt of Hogwarts, one of Diagon Alley, one of Gringots, like the Whomping Willow, which we talked about. And so tell me a little bit, are those 3D sculpts you made? Are they sculpts that you pulled in from elsewhere and modified? And what are the final materials going to be?
So the only one that is made by me, and it's actually just by essentially tracing somebody else's mesh file, is Hogwarts. Everything else is actually just a mesh file that I downloaded and converted to a solid using Fusion, which it has some of that functionality built in. But Hogwarts, it was such a massive file, like none of the conversion features are working, so I had to actually go through like one by one and do cross sections and then trace a sketch and then extrude that feature. It was a very, very long process. But like eventually the goal is, so I actually have a large format resin printer, so I'm going to use that to do the 3D printing. And I went the route of resin because I don't want like the lines as it's printing. I want it to look decent because then I'll actually paint them and make them look, good.
So did you have the resin printer before, and have you been doing 3D printing previously to this project? Is that one of the hobbies that you picked up previously?
It's one of the hobbies I picked up for this.
It's becoming very clear that in doing a homebrew is really picking up multiple hobbies at the same time and learning craftsmanship and all of them. So you mentioned painting. So do you have an artistic side as well in addition to the mechanical, electrical, and design? Have you done model painting before?
Only a little bit of model painting before. Like I played some tabletop games as
Gotcha.
in high school and stuff like that, but I'm definitely not a great artist, but I have taste for that kind of thing. So we'll see how they turn out. I don't know.
Well, the nice thing is, you don't want to make a mistake your first time, but if you do, and that's how we learn, you can always print out another one. You've got the digital image from the beginning. All right, or the digital file, I should say. So in the middle of your playfield, you've got mag rail, slide track, and groove. And maybe I wasn't like completely paying attention or I missed it. What's going to be on there? Like how does that integrate into the theme? What is that thing that's moving? Because in my mind, that's the Elvis mechanism from or the big buck hunter game, big buck hunter mechanism. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
So being new to the pinball world, there's a lot of things that I didn't know kind of existed out there, but a lot of people are like, oh, that's the missed multi-ball from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Right.
It's like, oh, I guess it kind of is. So it was unintentionally, but the concept there is I have a magnet that is mounted on a carriage that is on a lead screw, and that is going to be driven by a stepper motor. And what that'll do is essentially that was kind of like one of the primary mechs that I wanted in the game when I started, is I want to use it to create moments. And so that will be whenever there's like a wand battle between Harry and Voldemort or whoever. It can grab your ball, it can move it back and forth along that rail, but also with it being really long insert, is I can cast like the green light for a spell and the red light for a spell, so it looks like
cool.
that kind of melting lava in air type of effect. And so it's going to create those kind of moments, but also allow me to do things like in Prisoner of Azkaban, when he learns the Patronus charm, and at the very end when he battles off the Dementors that are sucking the life out of him and Sirius, there's a huge moment where that Patronus just gets so large and just kind of radiates these white things.
Right.
So with that, like I'll use that to actually fling the ball in different areas of the play field, or like accelerate it up in orbit, or there's kind of like in the middle what I call like the Horcrux shot is actually a captive ball lock where you can shoot up in there, it holds your ball captive, and then you kind of bash it around in there and there's a magnet. But like I can also use that mag rail system to grab your ball and then fling it up into that captive ball lock and create some of that magic.
That's so cool. I did not at all catch that, but you explaining that, like I can see those moments happening. I'm so excited. That is awesome. So tell me, so let's talk about the goblets, the goblet of fire. So it's a captive ball, but it's also got a projector in it.
So it's actually not a goblet. That was one of my thoughts initially.
Oh,
was
okay.
like, what could I put over the space? Is like, can I put the goblet of fire there? But because my theme, what I'm trying to go for is the entire universe and not geared toward a particular movie. So I'm trying to create more so the playfield based around location rather than like things that are specific to a certain year in the series. So I didn't want to put goblet in there just because it was like too specific to just one year.
Mm-hmm.
Since the goal is you're going to be advancing through the years and progressing to actually kill Voldemort. So what that is actually the Prophecy Orb. And so that's actually, and I'm trying to figure out a way around this. Right now I have it's like a do-it-yourself snow globe kit that comes with a 4-inch glass snow globe. And then what I do is I have this acid etching cream where you can frost the interior of it. And then I have a little micro laser projector that mounts behind it under the playfield. And through a fisheye lens, it illuminates the entire sphere. So it's like, you can use it to not only like do the prophecy stuff, but that's going to be the primary like cock or the shot clock thing for modes, right? So, it'll have like a countdown timer in it, and you can also use that for moments too, like to display something and create a show around it.
That's really, really, really cool. I did not I did not realize that's what it was, and that projector looks so cool on that frosted interior, and like just you walking through how you came up with that, and I bet you the listener is agreeing with me. Like that is just some clever ingenuity that like how you talk to me about how you actually got to that point, like getting the etching, getting the snow globe, the kit, getting the projector, working it through a fisheye. Like that is a really cool solution. How did you get there?
So it actually kind of started out with, the Prophecy Orb was kind of early on as like a thought. Okay, I could use that to actually convey like modes and timing and stuff like that. But the concept came around like Disney and how they actually, for instance, they project onto like a piece of glass to make it look like ghosts are dancing in the haunted mansion, and
The best ride at Disney.
Yeah, trying to simulate like what they do with that, but within a contained glass sphere. Or in the same ride, the I forget her name, Madam whatever her name is, her face is inside of a globe. And it's the same thing. It's kind of like a projection inside of the sphere. I'm like, okay, so how can I do that myself? And I looked up like different methods that people do at like Halloween time and stuff like that. And so I actually bought this material that's kind of like a silvery colored fabric, and I tried to create a screen that you can project through the backside of, but it was still very two-dimensional. It's like, I didn't want you to look at that globe and just see like, oh, here's like a square outline of a 16:9 aspect ratio. It's like, okay, it's just another screen. So I actually went the route of exploring projection globes that some people make for like museums, and they project a map of the world into it. And so figured out that they use fisheye lenses for that, the projector. And I'm like, okay, how can I downscale that and use it for my purposes? Because they're doing it on like massive 36-inch spheres. It's like, well, I got room for a 4-inch sphere.
That is so speaking of space, the next mechanism, like I saw kind of it get exposed in a layer cake to me. And the first layer cake was, I saw Gringots, and I was like, wow, that is a cool sculpt. We talked about that. And then I see that there's this like vertical mech behind the corner wall of Gringots. And I'm like, that looks cool, but I cannot tell what it does. And then later on, you slow rolled me into it that it's a Gringots 3-ball lock. Talk to me about that mechanism, because it's just as cool above the playfield as it is below the playfield.
Yeah, so the goal with that is, so for each year, there's going to be a requirement to, I think, to play like a multi-ball, and there's going to be different multi-balls available. Obviously Quidditch is a big one. Gringots.
We'll talk about Quidditch.
The Weasleys, Hagrid, shooting Hagrid's hut, and maybe he becomes like an assist or a team up type of thing. Hogwarts, you got to have a lock for Hogwarts, right? So I wanted to do this for Gringots, and I wanted it to be a physical lock. So I also wanted something that when you're shooting from the right flipper, that you can feed that left wire form when it's not in lock mode. So when it is in lock mode, there's a set of forks that pop up under the playfield, not too dissimilar from the chest on Pirates. And that feeds into this mechanism that is just a 3-ball lock, and it uses kind of like a gate that's got a hinge point, and it holds everything in place above the wire form until at a certain point you lock that third ball, and then it'll just release them all down the wire form. I don't know if it's going to work. I hope it will.
Hey, look, that's the beauty of all this, right? You got to start somewhere. You're starting with something that you hope is going to work. And I can tell just from our conversation and from what you sent me before, you're going to work through it. You're going to figure it out. So you teed it up. So let's, and I've left it as the last mechanism to talk about before we go further.
Before you get to that, do you want to do the sorting hat first?
Oh, yes. Let's cover that first.
I think Quidditch is kind of like, the finale of my mechs.
I'll be honest. I didn't even have sorting hat on my list. So let's make it happen.
So in the back right corner of the play field is where the sorting hat will sit. And it's actually a multi-state diverter mech for the ramps.
I'm noticing a theme here, Kyle.
Yeah. So every ramp you shoot actually feeds to that diverter first, and it operates similar to like an old railroad turntable.
Wait, every ramp you shoot, every ramp in the game will go through that.
Yes, every ramp will go through that.
Sorry, I killed your foot.
No, you're good. Well, okay, I lied, with the exception of the one from the upper flipper. But every ramp shot from the main flippers goes through that. And it's like a railroad turntable where it can have different positions and feed different ramps or different wire forms. And it also has a magnet that is built above it that'll be hidden inside of the sorting hat. So like when it goes time to be sorted into your house, you shoot the ramp and the magnet like stops your ball and creates a show there. And then it can actually fling it back into a subway entrance, or you can actually feed that diverter mech from the subway. So I use that diverter mech to feed like so many different, I think there's like 4 or 5 different inputs and like 5 or 6 different outputs. So the combinations are just crazy what you can do with it.
I cannot wait to see that code. That's going to be unbelievable.
I don't want to see it.
So let's talk about the piece du jour. Now I'll tell you, I was putting this podcast together just about a month ago, and as I was looking and trying to figure out what I the very first podcast dropped a month ago, what I wanted to do, it was almost the exact same time where this 8-second video shows up in my feed, and it's of the Quidditch Mechanism. And I don't remember what I was drinking, but I spilled it on me. I think it was coffee. It was all over me. I was burning myself. It was hot, and I could not stop watching this video while the coffee's just spilling all over me. Ryan, take it away. Tell us everything about that Quidditch Mechanism, because it is amazing.
Yeah, so I don't know where the inspiration came from that. It just kind of happened at one point. In a lot of versions of my design, it was just like you would shoot the ramps and they would go up and through the Quidditch playfield, and sometimes they would divert onto it where you could actually play it.
Actually, Ryan, would you mind real quickly, since that we're not on video, can you like just describe the Quidditch playfield and what's there, just so the listener can build a picture in their mind?
Yeah. So in the upper left, it resembles the Quidditch pitch. And what it is you've got, the sculpts of the grandstands all the way around it. And on this Quidditch pitch is a clear piece of acrylic or polycarbonate that is attached to 2 stepper motors and lead screws that can raise this playfield up and down. So it's like your ball is flying and raising up and down. And as you're doing this, there's actually the scoring rings from the Quidditch pitch in there that you're trying to shoot through. And there's a spinner
goes through the scoring rings. It's so as the playfield goes up, that mini playfield goes up and down, you can actually control, because the flipper's going along with it. You can control hitting the ball through. It's absolutely amazing. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Like I wanted to have something more than just like, oh well, this raises up and down and there's just stand-up targets. I'm like, oh, that's boring. I want you to be able to shoot through the actual scoring rings. So the spinner, what I'm thinking will happen is as you shoot the spinner, that'll kind of like raise the play field. And the more time goes by without any switch hits on that spinner, it'll start to lower. So your goal is to kind of like hit consecutive spins to raise it up to each tier of those scoring rings and shoot them. And I don't know, maybe it'll be an extra ball if you get all 3, or maybe that's where the snitch comes out and you actually have to hit that to get an extra ball. But trying to design it so that the flipper moves up and down vertically. I mean, typically your flipper mech is, a solid thing bolted to the play field, right, and it's clamped in place and it can just rotate. Well, I had to make something that rotates but can also move up and down while it's being actuated by a flipper mech.
It's unbelievable. I cannot, I saw that and the first thing that went into my mind after I was burning myself was take my money. Like, this is going to be so amazing. I realized that it's a homebrew, and I was like, oh my God, that I just kept, and I just kept watching that video. And then when I saw some of your other diagrams, I started going under the CAD to try to figure out how it worked. It's absolutely amazing. So with that, we've covered the mechanisms, we've covered your design philosophy. You've been digital this whole time, and recently you've had some progress that comes into the analog world. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I actually streamed the cutting of the whitewood on my CNC. It was actually during Indisc, so we were watching Indisc and then we were cutting it at the same time. It took probably 8 to 9 hours to cut the whole thing out because I had some issues here and there, but gotta learn. So I cut that out, and then the last week or so I was getting the clear coat on it and making sure that's cured, and then I built my own rotisserie behind me that I'm actually going to put plans out there for other people to build it. So it's kind of like a really easy DIY rotisserie. where you can use extruded aluminum like 80/20.
80/20, yeah.
Yep.
It's the engineer's Lego set.
It is. So I'm using that, and I'm hopefully, getting something put together that a lot of people can use in the homebrew community, because it automatically would pitch your play field at 6.5 degrees, so you can play test it while it's in there and rotate it. And
that's brilliant. Like, that's innovation right there. That's so smart. Who would want to play test their play field while they're building it? That's just ludicrous. So in, you said you encountered some challenges, some difficulties. Now, I personally have some experience with CNC routers as well. Like, on the one side, they're like these automated robots that just go do a bunch of cool work for you, and like next thing you know, you've got 8 hours go by, you've got cut wood. What were some of the problems that you had?
the biggest problem that I had, so like I had everything kind of thought out in the beginning, like, all right, I'll create all my tool paths for the top side, and then I'll have it use the same exact 0 point when I flip it over to do all the bottom side tool paths and get
Kyle,
that
can you
line.
comment on what a tool path is and where that gets created? Because there's probably listeners who don't know.
Yeah, so a tool path is created in Fusion 360. So what I've been working on over the past year is creating the physical or the virtual model of the play field and trying to understand where the holes need to be. And in Fusion 360, you essentially generate what's called G code. And that G code is what the CNC machine uses to program its movements to cut those holes.
And for the listener, like, you don't have to have the details of the G code. That just happens to be something. It's basically a way that Fusion 360 knows how to talk to the CNC router without actually being physically connected to it.
Exactly. Yep. So in Fusion 360, you export these what you call tool paths, and each one does a different thing. Like, some of them cut out 2D contours, and some do pocket milling or your holes. So you just have to figure out what you need to create as a toolpath is concerned to create the playfield.
So you actually, going back to your design process for a second, I realized I killed your flow here. So this will be a stop
and
shoot
fine.
for a version. So you started in virtual pinball, did the shot layout, the basic geometry, exported the playfield layout, then worked in Fusion to build out the mechanisms, the assemblies, and I've got Fusion 360 experience. I cannot imagine that Fusion 360 was keeping up with all those assemblies and parts that move, but it does a great job. It's always amazing how it does it. And then from there, you then had to also design the tool paths for your CNC machine. So you export those, you put it on the CNC machine. What goes wrong?
So it was something really stupid when I changed over to exporting the tool paths for the backside. I had accidentally changed my units in Fusion from inches to millimeters. And in doing so, it was trying to cut out the whole playfield in about a little 1-inch square block. It's the
Stewie playfield. It's no big deal.
Yep. So it took me a minute to figure that out, ran back up to the house, and then re-exported with the correct units and figured that out. And then the other issue I ran into was when I flipped over to do the backside, everything was offset by like 1.5 millimeters. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out why. And I was out there all night, so I didn't bother coming back in to check the CAD. I was like, whatever, I'm just going to adjust my 0 point and rerun it. And turns out that when I created my 0 in the file, I forgot to account for the width of my actual plywood that I was using. So it was like 1.5 millimeters off.
Can you tell the listener what the 0 point is, just so they're aware?
Yeah, so a 0 point, whenever you like generate your tool paths to run, it needs a point from where it originates the running of that tool path. So it's called a 0 point, and that's where you set the machine 0 to, all right, I want the router bit to be exactly flush with the top of the plywood, and I want it to be exactly even with the corners of my plywood. So you set that 0 point, and then all of your files run from that same 0 point, so they all cut in the correct positions.
Did you have any issues with keeping the wood down on the CNC? Because you can't just clamp it down the way you do when you're doing a standard woodworking project, because the CNC head needs to be able to run where those clamps would usually be. So different CNC routers do it differently, but some have a vacuum, some have very low side clamps. How does yours work?
So actually, it was a tip that I found online watching YouTube videos back when I first was researching CNC machines. And this one guy uses actually painter's tape and super glue.
Mhm.
So you put painter's tape down on your surface, and then you put painter's tape on your plywood that you're cutting out, and then you super glue the two together. And then when it's all said and done, you can just peel it off the painter's tape.
God, that's so. I've had so many problems and bad CNC cuts or routes because I could never get the suction or what have you to work. That's genius. I'll have to try that next time. So look, this is absolutely amazing. Lots of innovation in processes, lots of innovation in learning, in design, in game flow. I cannot wait to see this thing, and it's great that you're seeing it in the physical world now. What's your immediate next step?
So I've been working the last week or so on building a bill of materials for the entire assemblies and everything. I downloaded a free trial on something that allowed me to export it from Fusion, and that trial expired yesterday, but I got everything I needed. And so now I'm placing links to every item I need and prices to everything I need, and building out shopping carts on like Pinball Life, and a little bit from Marco as well. And then it's just got a budget for it. It's like my shopping cart right now on Pinball Life is like $2,000 worth of mechs and screws and posts and all kinds of stuff.
So it's a labor of love, and it's a personal project for you. What could the custom pinball community do to help you?
Um, Really, I mean, I'm trying to prove that I can do it myself, and I welcome all advice and input. And I reach out to people who can help provide that. At times I'm in quite a few different discords and some homebrew communities where I can ask those questions. Lots of great people out there to help with that. But really, ultimately, is once I get it physically flipping, is play it and let me know what you think.
Yeah, you and I first connected on IM on Facebook, but I actually ended up we're on the same Discord server too. So where there's a bunch of custom pinball and homebrew discussions that happen. So I saw you there, and I saw you posting there as well. It's definitely a small community. So what keeps you up at night with the project?
Well, right now it's financing the build. I've got the shopping cart of everything I want to actually physically build it. But that'll be something I can get past relatively quickly. The biggest hurdle is going to be code. Like, I can code. I've taught myself Visual Basic and SQL, and I'm very fluent in those. But Python, code to me, it's like it's all the same logical kind of format. It's just you got to learn a different way of telling that, logical decision making. It's a different language.
Right.
So if you understand like the concepts of how code works, then it shouldn't take too long to pick up Python for me, I hope. And I'll, be using Mission Pinball Framework, which helps provide some of the good basic functionality you need, and, coding a homebrew.
And you brought up Mission Pinball Framework. We talked about the digital journey that you did on design. One of the cool things about Mission Pinball Framework is it can be used in your final game as you're going to be using it to do a lot of the control software. But the actual cool thing is they have a plugin for virtual pinball as well, so you can actually run physical devices from the virtual world. So you can actually start blending. I know you didn't go down this journey, but it is possible to blend with Mission Pinball Framework and some of the controllers out there, like the Fast Controller and the P-Rock, that you can actually run them from Mission Pinball through virtual pinball as well as the physical one that you're doing. So what's your favorite part of the whole process?
I mean, the favorite part to me is getting to a point. Well, I mean, obviously, like, I love working and tinkering on all this stuff, but to me, it's going to be when I have an actual playable Harry Potter game. And it's like, whether or not the industry ever makes one, I'll be good.
You'll have one. That's the cool thing.
I'll have one. I mean, it's something that I can say that I did. And like, I'm not trying to like get anything out of it. I just want to do it for me and prove that I can,
Look, man, if there's anything I can help you with along the way, I'm part of the community. I'm happy to. But in addition, once the game is ready, I'm more than happy to come by and play. And I don't know if you drink or not, but throw back a beer. And so I know how to get a hold of you. How can others get a hold of you if they want to? What's the best way?
So I haven't been doing like a blog or anything like that. I know I've had that question come up a few times, but what I have been doing is whenever I work on something that I think is of pretty, significant importance, is I'll stream on Twitch. And so I'm on Twitch. My name on Twitch is Kyle Bassa, but instead of an L, it's a 1. So KYBASA. So
I love that name, by the way. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Polish sausage,
Hey, puns and Polish sausage are two of the best things.
So you can find me on there, and then also I have a YouTube channel that I kind of started up recently, and so far I've just been uploading past live streams, but eventually I'd like to start making some kind of post-production content as well with my build and see what I can do to help others, inspire them and get building their own homebrews.
And we'll get a link to your YouTube channel on the show page. So Kyle, I have a question for you, and we hadn't discussed this previously, but there is a large financial side, and you're doing this on your own. I'm just shooting the shit, if you will. Would you be open to a Kickstarter, like to help you fund some of those parts?
I mean, I'm just not of the mindset where I'm not entirely sure what that legally involves.
Gotcha.
So like, I mean, yeah, if people want to send me gift money, who's going to turn that down? But I don't want to have the obligation to like fulfill something to backers. You know what I mean?
Totally. But like, there's people do, like, they want to fly to a friend's wedding or something, or fly to an event, and they it's like a GoFundMe basically. Maybe a Kickstarter is the wrong way, but I'm happy to discuss that with you offline. It was just kind of an idea as you were talking. One other thing that we didn't cover: what do you want to do about artwork, plastics, cabinet decals, back glass, and playfield art?
So my idea for art is really to kind of go the route of photorealistic. So it's kind of the recognizable characters from the franchise. I'm also not opposed to going the route of the actual cartoon drawings that are in the books and everything like that. But I think the most recognizable thing, that when people walk up to a machine and see, it's like, okay, well, there's Daniel Radcliffe. Right. There's, it's the people that, other people or players are familiar with. So I want something recognizable, but I think I'm going to pull that off anyways when you walk up to the machine. And I have this really grand idea. I don't know if it'll actually work, but I want to create an animatronic sorting hat topper that talks to you.
That'll be awesome. Listen, Kyle, this has been fantastic. I also want to thank you. You're the first interview that I've gotten the chance to do as part of the Pinball Innovators and Makers podcast. You are quite the pinball innovator and maker. I am quite excited to follow you along on your journey. Provided you had a good experience with this, I would love to have you back as you make and I'm sure the community and the listeners would love to hear that. You really went under the play field. You spent a lot of time, and I just want to thank you. What you're doing is absolutely amazing. I couldn't think of a better way to kick off this podcast than with Harry Potter and with Kyle Reed. So thank you.
Hey, I really do appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. Be happy to come back and review the progress as we get going.
Thanks, man. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for joining the podcast. Thanks for listening, and I can't wait to see what you make.